Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Robert Ferme. I lead the Academic and Government Insights at LinkedIn Learning. I'm humbled to be here, and I'm excited to talk about this unique inflection point that we're all in. Helping students develop critical competencies and land meaningful employment opportunities is top of mind for you as institutions. Similarly, at LinkedIn, our mission and vision are to create economic opportunity for all members of the global workforce, including and especially among those entering the workforce for the first time. So my goal for this presentation is to talk about who's hiring students right now and what they're looking for, and to stimulate ideas and themes to inform how we can best collaboratively and collectively support our students during this time. With this in mind, today, we're going to talk about three things through the unique lens of LinkedIn data and insights. First, we're going to glean lessons from the last recession to better contextualize this current moment. Second, we're going to assess the state of today's workforce for students in light of the global pandemic. Who is hiring students, for what skills? And then lastly, we're going to highlight some best practices that students can take to truly stand out as they enter today's workforce. Let's dive in. First, what are lessons that we can glean from the last recession in 2008 and 2009 to help contextualize the current recession? This is unquestionably a difficult job market for us all, and especially for recent graduates. In August, the unemployment rate in the United States was at 8.4%. This is much lower than the spike that we saw in April of this year, and lower than the 9.7% rate that we saw in the last recession, so there's some good news there. However, the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that August unemployment rates are much higher at 12.6% for Americans without a high school diploma, and also among underrepresented communities. So while we're generally declining towards progress, we know that disparities do exist among members of our population, and that it's still too early to tell what the long-term effects are. But what can we learn from the last recession? Using LinkedIn data, we looked at career paths among those students that graduated in the last recession, and here's what we found. First, for those that did get hired, many may have faced underemployment. 2009 grads were 12% less likely to get hired within 6 months of graduating. And because of this, we also saw that graduate school became a lot more appealing. In fact, 2009 grads were 5% more likely to go back to grad school compared to years prior. Second, from a sector perspective, the industries that gained the largest shares of new graduates in 2008 and 2009 were restaurants, military, and retail. Historically, we found that military sectors tend to boom during recession periods. This year, however, may be a slightly different story for restaurants and retail sectors, as both are impacted by government-mandated public health measures. We also saw some long-term effects. For example, we saw that in 2009, those grads were 4.5% less likely to become senior managers within 9 years into their career. However, we also saw improvements, namely among subsequent cohorts. For example, the job market for new grads improved in 2010, where those grads had a 5% higher chance of getting hired than their 2009 counterparts. That was the last recession in 2008 and 2009. But what does today's labor market look like? Who's hiring and for what? Here's what we've seen from the last few months. First, let's talk about jobs. What are some of the most in-demand entry-level jobs right now? In-demand entry-level jobs are predominantly in healthcare, transportation, and IT. But there's a wide disparity, from material handlers working in warehouses, to developers, to physician assistants. We also see product management topping the chart. Product management has been in demand and will continue to be in demand throughout the pandemic. But what about current students? Longer term, for students that are currently in school, what are some pathways that they may want to consider? Some sectors are still relatively tight. Many of them are STEM related and require a relatively high level of skill. Here are some emerging jobs that are likely to continue to be marketable into the future. As you can see, there are tech jobs like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity specialists, data scientists, and engineers. We're also seeing an emergence among customer success specialists and sales development representatives, especially within tech. Geographically, we're also seeing major shifts. Based on our data, we're seeing migrations away from large metropolitan areas with high cost of living into smaller cities like Austin, Charlotte, Tampa, and Seattle. We may see this persist and potentially exacerbate as large companies across the globe continue to sustain remote work environments throughout the pandemic. Austin, in particular, has been adding workers faster than any other US cities. Austin is attracting people from major metro areas like San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles as it grows its tech sector. In Austin, hiring demand is quite high, with more than 43,000 open job postings, and that growth is largely being driven by sectors like venture capital, e-learning, computer and network security, and internet sectors. Given all the mobility and the fact that career paths are not always linear, it behooves students to focus on transferable skills that can increase their chances of employability. And so we analyze millions of job postings across every industry to find the most transferable skills that you'd likely need in any job. These are the skills that employers are looking for most, so make sure to include these on your LinkedIn profile if you have them, or take some LinkedIn learning classes to learn something new. You'll note that many of these skills are soft, such as communication, problem solving, and project management, skills that really can translate across numerous occupations and sectors. In the first part of the presentation, we assessed the last recession to help inform and contextualize the current recession. Then we talked about the current labor market to inform potential jobs and skills that are trending to inform student pathways, both for recent grads and students that are currently in school. In this final section, we'll talk about last practices that students can take to truly stand out as they enter today's workforce. Three things come to mind when we think about enabling access to opportunity for students: information, social capital, and credentials. We know that each of these are not evenly distributed among students, especially those that come from underrepresented and under-resourced communities. So 3 best practices to better level the playing field today. First, information and credentials. Learn trending and relevant skills. It is well known that skill demands quickly evolve. Studies by Forbes projects that 54% of all employees will need reskilling and upskilling by 2022. And as institutions, this can be challenging for 2 reasons. On one hand, you need to keep a pulse on dynamically changing employer skill demands. And on the other hand, there's a challenge of nimbly adjusting curriculum and programs accordingly, which isn't the easiest in school institutions. 2, social capital. Data shows that who you know is just as important as what you know, and having a meaningful network and connection at an employer of interest can be extremely advantageous for a candidate. Therefore, it behooves you to increase the size and quality of your network. Lastly, and certainly not least, self-care. Take time for yourself. It goes without saying that 2020 has been a difficult year for everyone, but especially for students who have the additional stress and anxiety in entering the workforce when unemployment is so high. It is important to remember to take a step back and find time to recharge and invest in yourself. Let's double click specifically on the social capital and credential levers in driving access to opportunity. When assessing LinkedIn data, we found that students who are active on LinkedIn have a better chance of getting hired. Applying to a job within the first 10 minutes after receiving a LinkedIn job notification can increase your chances of hearing back by up to 4 times. A LinkedIn member with a LinkedIn Learning Certificate added to the profile is 9% more likely to get hired than a member without one. And on LinkedIn, applicants are nearly 4 times more likely to get a job at a company where they have connections. And that's due to several factors. First, many companies have an employee referral program, so a meaningful connection could be your strategic foot in the door. Second, this connection could also give you valuable intelligence on the organization and potentially the team or role that you are applying to give you a competitive advantage in the interview process. Moreover, when we assessed graduates who successfully got hired during the recession, we found that connections were particularly advantageous. In fact, 36% of recent grads who successfully got hired since March of this year had a first-degree connection at their employer before they got hired into the organization. And this was particularly more prevalent and important for those graduating with an MBA and master's degree, where up to 47% of those hired had a first degree connection at the company they were hired into. Hence, your network matters. Use it to your advantage. Secondly, we assess the types of certificates possessed and posted by recently hired graduates to better understand the value of certificates as a credential in this environment. Here are some takeaways. While certificates do have value, only a small portion of those hired in the last few months, roughly 14 to 15%, actually added a certificate to their profile before their hiring event. While that may be the case overall, the data shows that building and marketing certificates were particularly prominent among successfully hired associate degree grads, more so than any other degree cohorts. This suggests then that certificates may be particularly beneficial to this population of graduates more so than any others, and therefore it's important to promote your certificates and credentials to prospective employers as a competitive differentiator. But what types of certificates mattered? Among those grads recently hired during the pandemic, tech, marketing, and healthcare-based certificates were the most popular. Things like Google Analytics, Google Ads, Search and Fundamentals, and basic life support for healthcare providers. When it comes to competencies and skill development, we looked at the grads who successfully found employment during this pandemic and identified the types of content they uniquely watched on LinkedIn Learning that set them up for success. There are 4 takeaways here. First, advanced degree holders such as PhD graduates watch advanced technical content such as those related to machine learning, 3D modeling, and big data analytics, conceivably to help refresh and prepare them for technical interviews. Second, associate degree holders watch vocational technical content such as those related to content management systems, finance, print production, video editing, and sales. Thirdly, a bulk of our graduates, those that graduated with an MBA, a master's degree, or a bachelor's degree, watched content that focused on building transferable soft skills such as communication, presentations, leadership, and management. And finally, 4, across the board, everyone watched content on career development and personal branding. Things like how do you pitch yourself, how do you deliver an elevator pitch, and how to be a thought leader. So it's evident that while skills and competencies are important, they are table stakes. What can really differentiate you as a candidate, especially in this moment, is your ability to communicate and market your value to prospective employers. But here's the biggest lesson. This pandemic will cause lasting changes in the world of work. In fact, many established economists project that the economic repercussions from this pandemic could persist well after the pandemic is contained. So I want to leave you all with a quote which I believe encapsulates what we as individuals can do, and it comes from the best-selling author and American attorney, Elizabeth Edwards. And the quote is this: "She stood in the storm, and when the wind did not blow her way, she adjusted her sails." My take: focus on what's in your sphere of control. If you can help students adjust their sails, you can help them ride this pandemic to new heights. Thank you for your time.